Everyone, welcome in. Betsperts Golf here for our first look at the Valero Texas Open. 1 week away from Masters Week, the one we cannot wait for, excited for, coming off of a pretty exciting last week at Memorial Park, which did not disappoint. I mean, I played a little softer than previous years. I still think it's a fantastic golf course. We had what we probably would expect if you would have told us going in that we had a Minwoo Lee, final group situation. We had a very volatile, very exciting final round of golf. I thought it was fantastic watch. Although you and I and Andy, all three of us had Minwoo Lee sweats, so maybe a little less enjoyable. But until we get to the end run, and we did get that nice little lag putt and nice little Minwoo Lee cash.
I agree with you. I love that course. I think it is just the perfect mix of, people like to see guys bomb it off the tee, and then you combine that with just the tricky greens, and you have to be creative. And yeah, Minwoo, he's a guy who, he's won 3 times on the DP World Tour, but for some reason he just struggled just putting 4 rounds together. And so, to kind of see him do that, I mean, we all know the talent he has, but then the leaderboard he was dealing with, we're getting down the stretch there, and that leaderboard was just amazing. And so, I think that's really going to give him a boost moving forward. We've seen that this with a couple guys, they get that first win, and then it's just kind of steamrolls from there. So I think it'll be really interesting, even at Augusta for him. I know he has some, weaknesses, with his approach game at times, but just to see where this takes him. And so, but just, I think overall Memorial Park is a course where exactly the type of players who are going to have success here. It was literally all bombers on top of that leaderboard. I mean, McIlroy, Clark, it was, so I think that's this is one of the weeks every year, just, have to keep it in the notes, bombers off the tee who, who can survive around the greens. I think that's kind of the recipe for success there.
Yeah, even the secondary tier, when you looked at maybe what the top of the board looked like on Saturday before, Rory and Wyndham kind of made their way up, it was just nothing but even guys that maybe had no form, just absolute bombers, guys that maybe low-level guys that showed up in Mexico a little bit, like an Isaiah Salinda, all of a sudden, he's in the mix. It's just guys that maybe didn't even have form, like Toasty, again, Toasty here in Mexico and Toasty in Houston, just pretty clear-cut way to build, especially for DFS. Just really easy way to cross some names off and to start building player pools and mixing that up, because it just is a very clear delineation into what matters that week, more so than any. Yeah, I mean, it played a little bit easier, but I mean, it was, I think, softer. These Texas courses sometimes can play very firm and fast because of wind. We had a little bit more rain down in Houston, obviously a lot more rain down in Houston leading up to it, so it played significantly softer. But I think most years we'll probably see it in that I don't know, low to mid teens to win too. I don't think you're going to get into the 20 very often, but Rory playing well over the weekend, Scotty figuring it out as we head into Augusta, which I think is very, very interesting to see those two and where they're at and their games are trending. For Scotty to feel like he's, I don't know the narrative of Scotty, what's going on so far, but the dude just still is top 20, top 10 almost every week. And it's oh no, he just doesn't have a win yet in 6 starts. Well, I mean, that's most guys. That's very normal. But for Scotty, it's well, what are we doing? It's been years since he's gone into Augusta without a win. So I don't think that precludes him from winning at Augusta. I think he looks very, very sharp. And I think some of the around the green stuff that we saw last week kind of fits what we see in Augusta. And he obviously knows that place very well. So excited to get into that. Pretty strong field for Valero, for San Antonio. Before we head in, some guys use it as, just want to play the week before a major. Some guys, I think what we saw last week, maybe want a better course fit and tune up. And I don't think it's, they'll head down probably and play a bunch of practice rounds as much as they can with all that goes down in Augusta this week. But pretty solid field for TBC San Antonio. Ron, you talk to us a little bit about the Valero.
Yeah, so this is it's a par 72, fairly long. Here in the San Antonio area of Texas, it's kind of surrounded by the Cibolo Canyons, kind of a rocky, hilly area. That's what Texas is known for. I've been down there many times. That hill country is a very scenic place. But yeah, you start off the tee and, you've got a lot of challenge as far as very narrow fairways, We all remember the Kevin Na, 16. I forget what hole that was, but if you're
Yeah.
really wild off the tee, you're going to have to deal with a lot of brush and mature oak trees, and so it's similar in a lot of ways to Memorial Park last week. You have some danger, but it's really wide off the fairway. But for the most part, very thin rough again. We're looking at just a little over 2 inches. So again, I think trying to kind of create, Augusta for a lot of these guys, who are, a lot of guys who didn't play last week, trying to get some reps in. Not as difficult around the green as we saw last week. I think short game is one of the kind of easier areas. For me, kind of approach is going to be the key this week. I know, typically this course, the biggest defense is going to be the firmness of the course itself and the greens. And then you have, it's a course where you do have trees, but it's a little bit more wide open. And so, I know the winds have tended to play a big impact here. I know when winds are calm, this is not an easy course. I still would put it in the difficult category. But calmer winds definitely lead to higher greens and reg, and then less, scrambling around the greens is less important. So, I think we need to definitely pay attention to the weather. But yeah, it's your typical par 72. You have your normal assortment of every par threes, fours, and fives. So yeah, for me overall, I think this is one of the difficult ball striking courses. I think it is in the top 10. And when you combine off the tee and approach, it is one of the top 5 toughest ball striking courses on tour. So really not any holes that stand out. It's pretty nondescript as far as architecture goes. So I know some people find courses like this boring, but yeah, it's just a good lead up week to the Masters. Like you said, we got some names here who I think fit the course well. A guy like Tommy Fleetwood. Obviously, we've seen Corey Connors win here twice. Akshay just really good off the tee. So yeah, I love the field and look forward to it.
I like weeks like this where like you kind of bring everyone in, coming off of last week where it was very much specific like golfer archetype that was going to be in play. It can be a little bit harder to handicap because there isn't necessarily like one fit necessarily. So you're more price sensitive in terms of betting outrights. I think there's easier ways to get unique in DFS because you can see a lot of ownership kind of. You just kind of spit out some of the same stuff. So you're probably not leveraging or losing much in terms of leverage that you can get from an ownership standpoint. So these are, I think, pretty interesting weeks from a speculation standpoint. But yeah, great field. I mean, we got 25 guys that are in the field next week at Augusta here, which is, I think, increasingly more than normal that we've seen in years past. And last year's field was pretty strong for the Oaks comparatively. So yeah, Ludwig's here, Decky, Tommy, Keegs, Cantley, Spieth, like a really strong field, but a bunch of guys, how they want to tune up. I mean, obviously you'd rather, Augusta's not a place where, you can have course history, but typically not a place that you go in fine form. You'd like to see some guys kind of get dialed in and have some competitive rounds here before they head over to Georgia for next week. So yeah, I definitely think that I wouldn't rule out any of the top of the board here, though you call out in your article on your preview that's up on the site, pretty wild array to the point that I was talking about in terms of past winners here. So you've been all over the board, some, 350 winners, to Corey Connors is a qualifier. And then Corey Connors is one of the chalk pieces. So kind of all over the board in terms of handicapping week, what I think is interesting. So yeah, I like the field. I like that we have, I was kind of looking at this stuff over the weekend. And I was like, man, this is a better field than I thought. I thought that we were going to get something that was a little bit weaker here, but a lot of good guys coming in. Let's take a look here quickly at the opening odds, courtesy of our friends over at the Lines. Shop this around, obviously, because these things can change quite a bit here on a Monday morning. You can see Ludwig at the top, basically 12 across the board. Tommy Fleetwood, 14. I mean, look, Tommy's really, really good. This course fits him very well. Every course fits him very well because he's an absolutely elite golfer. 14-1. It's really, really rich. You're paying for something that's never happened before at 14. Corey Connors obviously touched on the course history. Patrick Cantley at 20. Hideki's here at 20. Short number on Spieth, 25. Nice course history here in the past. Obviously, Keegs, 25 as well. Akshay. So again, a bunch of guys short of 30, which is, we're coming off of a week where it was Scotty and Rory sucking up like all the oxygen at the top. And now the books are trying to get back. Ron and I were talking before we hit record, like books probably, I think, took a bath, relatively speaking, for a Minwoo Lee win last week. I think it was a pretty solid, chalky community win. And they are making us pay the piper on a Monday morning on the opening odds board. There's a lot of guys short of 30 here. Michael Kim, just on the right side of the top 50 in the world golf rankings, gets himself into the Masters, which you love to see. Denny here, obviously, absolutely nuclear Denny last week. Did Michael Kim drop out or something? Is that why? I wonder why he's not posted here on FanDuel. The guy needs a break, especially if he's in the Masters field. Yeah. Siwoo. I mean, it's just all these guys at 40 or shorter. I mean, it's just so many. So I'm interested to see how the board kind of reacts to, guys not getting bet. I mean, Bud Colley's playing really good golf. Bud Colley at 50. What are we doing here? This is rich. Gary's been 120 plus for, 6 months. Now play some, insane golf over the weekend. And we're 50 and 60 on Gary. So tough opening odds board, but if it's trying to make leans based off of pricing, the board is not giving us any favors here early in the morning, Ron.
Yeah, like I was telling you, I think, this is a week to wait, just kind of see how it all shakes out. I know looking forward to the weather, which I never like to do on a Monday, but, it is looking like it's getting a little dicey on the weekend as far as winds, gusts getting over 30 miles an hour on Saturday and Sunday. So definitely have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, I think this is a week where you look at some of the past winners, and what strikes me is a lot of these guys, not only are they, really good off the tee ball striking type, but they're also guys who are really good in the wind. Actually is one of the best wind players on tour. When I use the rabbit hole, always, looking at, the filter we have for wins of 18 plus. Corey Connors is always up there. So he's a guy who kind of always plays well in these Texas conditions. Obviously Spieth, can shape his ball any way he wants to. And even a guy like Charlie Hoffman, a guy who always plays well in Texas, won back here in 2016. So I definitely think looking at the wind and kind of waiting to see, if there's any edge. I know we've been burned by that a little bit. At least I did a couple weeks ago. But,
Same.
I think just with, like you said, there's just not much value. I mean, maybe Sam Burns at 50 to 1, but his game is horrible right now. So I think just kind of waiting here and seeing kind of if we can get some value as the week goes on.
Cam Young backers have to be absolutely salivating today to get, Cam Young at 100 to 1. Just 110 out there on a Cam Young, which is, just interesting. Same thing. I mean, look at Homa, Lost in the Wilderness, 125, just, really just feels unbettable at this point until he figures it out. Again, we said that a couple weeks ago about Hovland. I mean, Hovland himself said it a couple weeks ago, and then guys can maybe figure it out. But definitely a challenging week right now based off of how these opening odds have come out. So we'll see what happens there. Let's dig into some rabbit hole stuff here real quick before we do. Great deal for you right now to take advantage if you are not a subscriber at BetSports Golf. Take advantage of this deal. It is a fantastic offering from our friends over at Drafters. Pretty much I feel like everyone does some sort of football speculation in some sense. They like to draft best ball leagues, and for NFL, it's not too early for you. You want to get some of those rookies before the draft, you can go ahead and do that. We also have I played in a bunch of 4-man golf drafts this week over Drafters. First time checking it out. Those are really fun. Cashed in all of them. So I'll be playing some more of that this week. Just really fun, easy to use interface. Go over to Drafters. Download the app. Use promo code BSG. This is an article over on the site here at betsportsgolf.com. If you're watching on YouTube, very, very, very easy to use. Download the app. Use promo code BSG. You have to use the promo code BSG. You can click here through the link on the article as well. Deposit and play at least $10. You got to play the $10 as well. Again, if you like these types of games and you like Drafters, you like some of their competitors in the space, very similar games, they will match your first deposit up to $100. So take advantage of that if you like to play these games. But all you need to do to access BetSports Golf is deposit and play $10. Then you're going to get an email from us within 48 hours of how to get a free 90-day subscription to BetSports Golf, no additional charge. So it is essentially, you can do it for as little as $10 for 3 months. It's going to get you through basically all of the majors. It's a fantastic deal for you to get. Right now, a quarterly sub for the same price is like $80. So you're getting this for $10. So take advantage of this. Drafters is in, I think, 42 states. Yeah, they're all listed here. Again, even in Michigan, Ron. You guys are typically left out. Says Michigan's on the list. So, you guys got to get in there. I know Michigan. I don't know. Michigan's, you've been early on sports betting, but all these other games, Michigan doesn't get in. But this one's for Michigan. So 42 states. Take advantage of drafters. Draft some best ball leagues. Draft some 4-man golf leagues. A lot of fun. Any questions? Reach out to us directly on Twitter or at BetSports Golf. Happy to help you get started here and jump in. $10, guys. Dig in the rabbit hole by yourself. You want Ron's preview in the Discord. Can't get better than that. It's the best deal we got for sure. And it'll be the best deal we probably have for the rest of the year. All right. DBC San Antone Oaks course. See par 72 stretched out to 74.38, which we classify on the long side here. Looking at our core stats page here on the site. Interesting that it is a Greg Norman, Sergio Garcia design. Big week for Liv. We got to watch those guys too as they tune up for Augusta at Doral, which is not a great warm-up per se for them, but you'd like to see them carrying some form over here. Not a lot of water, not a lot of bunkers, but as Ron touched on, definitely some challenging with kind of just the natural terrain of the course here. We got Poetriv greens, short rough. We're mixed off the tee, but this is the ball striking test that Ron's talking about. Strokes gained off the tee difficult, strokes gained approach difficult. So that's definitely something that we should be looking at this week. Some of the putting and around the green stuff is a little bit easier or average. Nothing that stands out here, but just in terms of scoring, you see average par threes, par fours are difficult, par fives are difficult. You go hole by hole, just not a lot of green here in terms of average scoring. You got to kind of pick your spots here on some of these par fives, but
look at the first four. Look at the first 4 holes really quick. So this is the longest first 4-hole stretch on tour. So just a massive length holes to start with, and a really tough, challenging ones too.
Yeah. I mean, par fours over 450, 170-yard par 3, and then a 602 on the par 5. So, it's a week 2. Like I was looking at going for the green percentage, that looks a little bit lower than normal as well. So a lot of like guys playing these par 5s as 3 shots, because you can see, I mean, the 18th, 591. 553. So all these par 5s, 6. We saw this is 602. So these are all stretched out. These are 3-shot holes for a lot of the field here this week. So it's why you see too in the approach shot distribution, there's a lot of 250 plus, a lot of 200 plus, and there's a lot of wedges because those wedge shots are your scoring holes. So I think looking at those wedges are more important because that's really that's a scoring shot, right? Like your proximity from 200 plus or 250 plus, really, not necessarily 200 plus, 250 plus more so. It's really just kind of getting yourself like green adjacent, right? It's not necessarily putting yourself in position to score. You're just trying to get the ball up as close as you can to the green versus laying yourself up for that third shot. That's the shot that you're trying to get up and down basically to score. I think those are going to be important to look at this week. I think also looking at guys that do go for the green, I think could be advantageous to give yourself a shot if that's something that is part of your game. So see off the tee, nondescript, everything is pretty flat comparatively. You see driving accuracy low, very, very low. But part of that is, the nature of the course and guys not really trying to keep it in play because of the low rough. You just can't have those massive Minwoo Lee type misses because the brush can get you into a ton of trouble. You can see here some of the distance from the edge of the fairway stuff, distance from the center of the fairway stuff. That's a little bit higher than a PGA Tour average as well. Approach, you can see the greens in reg. Then I'll let you jump in here too. This is what I was talking about too. Going for the green run, about 13, 15% less than the tour average event. So that kind of talks to what I was discussing there a minute ago. Guys, not really being super aggressive. Maybe there's an edge for the aggressive guys who have some success there. Because even when you go for the green here, you're seeing about, green hit rate about half of what we typically see on a tour average event.
Yeah, like you said, par five scoring is going to be really key this week. I can't remember what the number is, but it's like 7 of the last 11 winners were in the top 10 in par five scoring. So, you know, I think I completely agree with you. I think going for the green data is something to look at this week, because you pretty much need to try to make some ground and separate on those par fives. But it's just so tough even holding the green, like you said. And if you throw in some
Mm.
windy conditions, and you're going to see a challenge here. So, yeah, but for me, I think even if you look at off the tee this week, I know it's going to be a big focus. Even from the fairway bunker, and when you look at, these are some of the deepest, most difficult bunkers to hit off on tour. And so approaching the green from these bunkers, I think it's only 44% is the green and reg from the fairway bunkers. There's not a lot of them, but they're just so strategically placed.
Yeah.
I think it's a weird course in that there's not like water hazards, but like we said at the top, if you hit it off tee, as far as going wide into those those canyon areas and those rocky wooded um, you know thickets of bushes that have kind of surrounding many of the fairways here, that's when you're going to get in trouble. So definitely when we get to off the tee here, I think distance from edge of fairway is something to look at this week for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to keep it in play in the sense that you don't have that massive, massive wayward miss. You can see a shot approach distribution that I was touching on here. You can see a good amount from, tick above tour average from the 50 to 125 range, again, with the mindset of those being really important from a scoring standpoint. Those really matter this week because of the nature of some of the stretched out par fives that we have here too. Nothing that's too outside of the normal range in the typical 150 to 200 bucket. You can see those are kind of in line of a tour average event. And you get out to some of the 200 plus, you can see total is a little bit below tour average, but then you kind of get into specific buckets and you can see that there's a little bit more from like 250 plus, I believe. Yeah, so 250 plus total is almost double tour average event. But again, those are going to be layup shots for the most part. You'll be some guys that are going for the green with those, but for some of those guys, that is just getting a hybrid to a number that you like for your third shot. But I think it's definitely interesting to see kind of how those are distributed across the board. So, thinking about this is like a week to model, but I think it's a good week to think about the specific player because, if you have a guy that is maybe going for the green at a higher rate than others, then maybe that guy, even more so than, say, a Denny McCarthy, maybe someone with a little bit less distance. I care a little bit less about what that guy's doing around the green compared to the bomber who might be going for the green at a higher rate, because that guy might having to be scrambling where, his third shot is, a pitch shot from around the green, whereas someone who's laying back, his third shot's coming from, 120 yards in, right? Or something like that. So I think thinking about the player specifically as you try to match up how to handicap the week, I think is really important. That's a little harder to do in a model when you're kind of baking everything across evenly. But looking into, like, when you look at player pages, thinking about how that player is going to play, I think is an interesting way to kind of go about it this week.
That is some deep thinking right there. I mean, no, seriously, I think what you could do though with the rabbit hole is you can favorite players. And so you
Yeah.
take your bomber, take your aggressive guys and then favorite them, and then you can kind of look, okay, let's see what these guys do around the green. Let's see. So I think, with the rabbit hole you can get very specific like that. Maybe not, like you said, maybe not bake it into your model per se, but
Yeah.
you can get really creative with favoriting subsets of guys and then looking at this stat and that stat. So I think that's a great way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, we want to build models through it, but also, like, use the tool however you need to use the tool to, like, land on whatever your desired outcome is. And so looking through it in different ways, like Ron said, using the favoriting tool where you can kind of put these guys in one bucket. I want to look at the bombers and around the green, and I want to look at the shorter guys and their, wedge approach shot accuracy, or messing around with different sample sizes for, what's their recent form there, what's their baseline form. That'll definitely be something that I'm looking at this week when I try to make some decisions. What was really interesting too is that if you look at the leaderboard last year, Denny and Akshay separated, right? Like, it became, Akshay played really good golf, and then, Denny went berserk on the fourth round, especially I think he's 28 in the front or something crazy. But you see Rory third there at 11. Like they doubled the field. They ran away. So you can have a situation like this where guys pull away, but for the most part, like it's you've seen like Corey at 15 the year before, JJ Spawn at 13. I think they had nice weather in 21 where Jordan won. So not necessarily a spot where you necessarily have to think that you're racing in 20 because they did last year. Most of the field's not doing that. So shocking no one. I realized I bet Russell Henley here last year. Not in the field this week, but again, this is a standard Russell Henley performance here. Fourth, keeping himself in the mix with a bunch of 69s, but not actually threatening the top of the leaderboard. So not the new Russ, though. The new Russ Ron wins golf tournaments, but this is the old Russ at his finest here. Same thing with the Tommy Fleetwood. Poor man's Russell Henley, which is a tough scene for Tommy Ladd. All right, let's dig in. Let's play around with some stuff here. Where would be kind of a foundational piece that you'd want to look at this week?
Yeah, I'm still like just from an overall perspective, I'm still going to look at long and difficult. I'm not going to combine them this week. Obviously, this is not like a major type test where you're looking at kind of both.
Yeah.
So just overall, I'm going to factor those two in. I think looking at Texas courses is another option because I think I think Memorial Park, I think Colonial even very tough off the tee.
Yep.
I think doesn't have the exact characteristics of San Antonio this week, but I think we do see a theme with Texas courses, guys kind of playing well in those, and whether it's good ball strikers in the win. So, but yeah, I'm gonna kind of mix and match and look at just like you have it here.
So this is look through difficult and very difficult scoring conditions. Looking at the last 2 years to get a bigger sample here, I could see what you would expect, mostly top of the board. Ludwig, Decky, Tommy, Corey Connors, another Bud Colley. Shout out, 26 rounds, so smaller sample than most of these guys, but has played pretty well in that sample. Cantley, Bahama Breeze's Danny Walker, Jacob Bridgman. You can see Denny in here, mostly getting it done with the putter. Some of the ball striking stuff not as hot. Fitz is another guy that seems a little bit lost comparatively where he's been in the past. Akshay, your defending champ. Perez, Keegs. Okay, that looks good. That makes sense. Typically would expect your better players to separate in difficult conditions. We'll look at longer golf courses here as well. Separate will pull off the scoring conditions piece. And we'll look here at very long and long golf courses just to kind of get a baseline. And I think this is the correct way to do it. I agree with Ron. Like, I think looking at these things here doesn't matter. If you're looking at just recent form for some of these guys, they're playing on very different golf courses against very different fields, right? Like, it's really hard to, when you have so many guys that play in signature events, comparing them to where, the rest of the guys are, where a Chan Kim or a Steven Fisk are playing. It's a very different field. So I think having to put a little bit of contextual filtering in based off of the course, I think matters a lot. So again, your top of the line, again, Hideki, Fleetwood, Ludwig, Cantley, Connors are your top 5 on long golf courses, which makes a ton of sense. Here's Isaiah Salindo, who's playing really well lately, especially on longer golf courses. Finau is in the mix there. Some other names that we just saw as well. Sami Valimaki does not feel like a guy that would profile well on long golf courses, but that's the only time I ever see that guy on the leaderboard. So definitely something to consider between his showings in Houston and Mexico. Otherwise, we don't really hear from Jeff Feinberg Jr. Very often. So, yeah, someone called him out on that. I think it's true. I think there's a little Sammy and Bobby Mack love child in Jeff. He looks like a combination of those two guys. Shout out to Jeff. All right. No offense, buddy. Just, they look the same. All right. Let's look at Texas just to see, to your point, if there's something we want to see there. See if there's any success that get some different names, maybe another name that pops up that we weren't expecting. So you can go into course region, select Texas. I have a 2-year filter. We can back this out a little bit if we're not getting a great sample. 20 rounds. Just a couple for some of these guys. Not a lot of guys playing every year in some of these Texas events. Some of it is just the nature of where they fall in the schedule with, these two being back-to-back. You're probably not playing both for most of the guys. Colonial, not a spot where everyone goes. So small sample, but again, Valamakian, just the 4 rounds. Akshay, bigger sample. Finau, Woodland, Rose, Denny, Spieth. This seems like pretty good list of guys, even though, fight you on the sample being too small. It just gets a little bit tricky. But definitely something to maybe dig into a little bit. Maybe not something to model per se, but something to take a look at. Although I'm looking at long, and so it's a user error. I had the long and very long filter on, so that's why my sample's probably messed up.
Yeah, I do that. That's hard to forget sometimes. You get so engulfed in what you're doing, and I still got filters in there.
All right, so those are gone. Keegan, Finau, Connors, Fitz, Cooch are your top 5 in Texas over the last 2 years. Again, samples are kind of all over the map, but again, maybe something to look at is confirmation bias. If you wanted someone modeled well, someone you were considering, and then you kind of look at this as well and see someone that's fared well that you like, maybe you kind of check that box. More rounds that's played poorly. EVR, Higgs, Jimmy Walker. Jimmy Walker is in the field. All right, not a ton there. All right, what else should we do? What about off the tee? What do you want to do off the tee this week? I know you mentioned distance from the edge of the fairway.
Yeah, so this is not really like a driver heavy course. So you do have some holes where you're clubbing down. I think driving distance is very average on tour. Off the tee, driver usage is very average. So, for me, I think guys who obviously distance is going to help. Total driving is something to look at. But I think overall we've seen more of an edge towards accuracy than distance at this course. When you look at the past winners, you look at the top 10 finishers. Guys like Matt Kuchar. Chris Kirk, a lot of success here. So for me, guys, I think who can keep it in the fairway, who can, stay out of trouble, set up that approach shot. Like we said, you're gonna, those second shot, you have 25% of approaches coming from inside 125 yards. So,
yep.
I don't think, there's a huge advantage this week to bombing it, especially if you're wild off the tee. So I'm probably looking at, and again, there's not much penalty, the missed fairway penalty, the rough penalty, just like last week, it's very minimal. So I think, it's a tough week for off the tee as far as, how much do you weigh it? I'm probably not going to weigh off the tee a ton this week. It's going to be really heavy approach and around the green for me. But I think distance from the fairway in general is something I'll just kind of look at if not for anything else, just to get rid of the guys who are really wild.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can put in distance if you're trying to think about like the par 5 scoring and aggressive guys, but I think we can just hone in on, one of the going for the green specific pieces versus the distance. So you can look at distance from the edge of the fairway. Again, just a significantly better stat than driving accuracy, which is a binary yes/no stat. We talk on this all the time. It tells you a little bit more about the miss, which I think is really what we're trying to capture here. Is you cannot be spraying it into, the brush and the rocks and stuff here. And you guys keep yourself playable. The first cut, not very penal. So you want to, even though if you're not hitting fairways, you want to make sure you're keeping the ball in play off the tee. You can see here in terms of some bigger names, Tom Kim showing up well, Brian Harmon, which would be expected, CT Pan, Siwoo, Adam Svensson. Here's Connors and Fitz inside the top 20 as well. Daniel Berger, a very good control off the tee. See Postman there as well. Some of your bigger names off the tee. Key's been driving it really well this year. Your bottom of the barrel in terms of distance from the edge of the fairway. I could see Potgater, not a spot for him. Got her up. Again, these guys that are, absolute bombers. Their approach might change, but still, they hit the ball further. The miss goes further too. Mullinex again. Mullinex a great example of last week. Just like you're not seeing Mullinex outside of like Keen Trace or something like some alt fields, something, and then all of a sudden, he's top 10, threatening all weekend. Same thing with Jesper Svensson, hits in a mile. I think it's also a good way to maybe cross some guys off the list here as well. Woodland not checking the box here very well. Yeah, good to see Gary though make a nice little appearance. So that's another way to go about it. You just look at guys who performed really poorly on the stat that matters this week as well. Approach, touched on a few things. Obviously, proximity buckets we can do as well if that's a thing for you. I don't typically love modeling. But we got a question in the chat from Albert. Would you use going for the green or going for the green hit rate this week in terms of the best way to go about that?
Yeah, I think they're kind of two separate things almost, because going for the green is just simply how aggressive are you, and
Yeah.
then hitting the green, which is basically greens and reg when you do go for the green. That's more about your skill of, maybe if the greens are firm this week, which I know Texas has had some really dry conditions lately. So I think they're expecting the course to play much firmer, especially than it has been in some other years. So I think, guys with even a high apex height, that's another little extra thing we have that you can look at too if you want to. But yeah, I think, guys who, when you're coming in from 250 plus, guys who can hold the green from that distance, I think that's a unique talent too. So I think trying to find a combination of guys in both of those would be my strategy.
Yeah, I agree. I think where you're really trying to do is, I think you want to understand who's aggressive and who goes for it. So going for the green percentage is probably, I guess, my preferred way. I wouldn't say you can't use any of the others, but I think in terms of like if you're modeling what you would give the highest weight to, I think it would be just going for the green percentage, because that's really what we're trying to get out of that. And again, this is why I was saying I don't think you need to do too much with driving distance this week, because from an off the tee standpoint, it doesn't matter. You only really want it when you're talking about capturing who's aggressive and who's not. But this metric does all of that, right? This looks like basically the driving distance rankings when we search here by going for the green percentage. With Svensson, Celinda, Waring, Toasty, Norgard, Keith Mitchell. This is just guys that are absolutely bombing the ball off the tee. You see Spieth, Young, and Ludwig right in here. Sam Burns in here as well, as you mentioned. So some of the top of the board guys that are down in this mix as well, which I think is interesting to see.
And then another angle, like what I would do this week, and even if you don't model it, is look at difficult par fives, because we have the filter where, okay, let's take difficult par fives, let's expand the sample size a little bit, and let's see, when we get some of these tougher courses, like because when we look at going for the green here, like this is pulling in Bermuda and Corrales, and this is pulling in all the easy courses. So you kind of, again, thanks to the rabbit hole, can kind of I think it's at the very bottom there, par fives. So yeah, so like difficult, and yeah, even go maybe 3 years and just see, okay, when it's, you could even go long course, because these are some longer par fives as well. So, we have the long course filter, another option there. But, just get kind of, there's just so many ways you can get creative, where you're trying to create, okay, what is looking at the course this week, how specific can we get here?
Yeah, I don't hate this at all. It's just an interesting way to go about it, especially if you can get sample for baseline for especially your top of the board guys. Yeah, 40, 50 rounds. Who's aggressive in these scenarios? Some of the same guys, your longer guys. Let's see who has some success here when they do go for it too. Because again, you can look in conjunction for all these. They all matter a little bit. Again, this is not necessarily something you would want to model this way, but you can look at them next to each other. I think that's really helpful as well to get a sense of, okay, Toasty's going for it often and is also tops here, right? Smaller sample, but that makes sense. He hits the ball pretty far. We're like, if we just looked at going for the green hit rate without the aggressiveness, like this doesn't really help us for like a Kevin Roy, for example, just the way Matt McNeely, right? Not going for it a ton, has some success when he does, but also not necessarily going for it aggressively. This is just telling us the result when he gets there. So this is probably laying it up and having a really good, third shot with his wedge. So interesting way to kind of filter through this stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, again, this is just the driving distance rankings, basically, right? This is just guys that hit the ball a mile. Your birdie makers here, small sample at the top. You see Thor Bjornsson on the biggest sample, got her up. Toasty again, really, really just long hitters.
Put the rounds on like 24, and let's see, like the guys we might bet this week, who, if anyone jumps out.
Let's look at the Sam Burns rounds. see where those would be. All right. Genesis, US Open, BMW, but this is Olympia Fields. Open Championship, US Open, PGA. Right. So for the most part, major championships. It's a lot of difficult.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it, especially recently for him. So, and the Genesis, which makes sense too. So, all right, cool. Yeah. If you never know that, if you're looking at anything in the rabbit hole, when you get the round sample, you can click into that blue number that lights up there and it'll show you the rounds that are in the sample that are feeding the data, which is, I think, really a really cool feature of it too. All right, sweet. So par 5 scoring, that matters a lot. What else do we, anything else you want to capture? You said around the green stuff too?
Yeah, so there's two other big ones for me this week, is just par 5 scoring in general. And we kind of, it's kind of related to going through the green in a way.
Sure.
So I'll look at par 5 scoring just because I think it is important. But I think another big one this week is bogey avoidance and again, we get the same look as, we go to scoring menu there. Difficult courses, kind of looking at seeing, okay, when conditions get tough, whether it's from the winds, course plays very firm this week. Obviously we've seen scoring here pretty consistently be over par. So, how do guys, and especially in this type of field where it's kind of pretty balanced at the top, see if anyone can separate, kind of in the bogey avoidance and looking at birdie or better percentage. I like to look at both of these and see kind of who, like we did in the other ones, kind of who pops in both of those together, which you can do right here with this view very easily.
Yep. So still have the scoring conditions on, filtered for difficult and very difficult. Birdie rate overall. We'll click into average here. Looks like Ludwig at the top. It's played here before. Mixed results with Ludwig's small sample of stops here, but overall, just Bud Colley. All right. 23.5 birdie percent overall, difficult, very difficult scoring conditions for Ludwig and Bud Colley. Yes, for Svensson there as well. Bridgman, Ryan Gerard playing really good golf. Danny Walker, Preston Summerhays, guys you would not expect to see up there quite as much. Let's look at the bogey avoidance because you want to keep those big numbers off as well. Get small sample for some of these guys. This is the poor list of bogey avoidance. This is the good list of bogey avoidance. Again, small sample for some of the top, but in terms of bigger names, there's Tommy, Andrew Novak, Bud Colley again, Hideki. Let's see, we got Ricky's been playing some really good golf. Castillo, not Fowler. Corey Connors here, Doug Gim, Model Darling, Ludwig again. So yeah, these are matter this week because you want to keep these big numbers. So it's, kind of telling you a little bit of some distance from the edge of the fairway stuff, some scrambling, some bogey avoidance, keeping those big numbers off this week. I think these are definitely modeling stats for the week compared to some of the other stuff we're looking at. I think maybe look around, kick around, see if there's anything there. But I think bogey avoidance would be a model staple for me this week as well.
Agreed.
Let's see. Anything else to the people before we wrap?
No, I would just say last thing, check the weather,
Yeah. Well, let's look at winds.
Yeah. You see winds picking up. I think we might see some leaderboard guys from the past here pop up here.
Let's take the last 2 years on now. Let's see what we get. It's decent. So we'll go to strokes gained. Last 2 years, windy conditions. So this is, 19 plus gusts. We can get some sustains in this area here for sure. Yeah, I think this is a good sample. Finau at the top. Patrick Fishburne, Matt McNeely. Hoey also looking good there. Fourth, Sam Burns, Keegs, Sam Ryder, Matt Kuchar, Andrew Novak, Akshay Bhatia here. Top 10 win players last 2 years, just strokes gained total. You can kind of break into the buckets if you'd like. Who's performed poorly in the wind, larger sample, Peter Malnati. Big sample, bad wind, Ryan Palmer, surprising Texas guy, Kiz. Just guys aren't playing good golf in particularly. Aaron Badley, not good in the wind. Really good course history here, surprisingly. I was looking at your thing this morning. I'm like, Aaron Badley, just constantly top 30, top 40 here. Just surprising. So again, I like to look at the back end and see who's performed poorly and these metrics that we think are important as well. Now, win data can be a little noisy, but again, it could be maybe not something that up to you if you want to model it or not. But I breaking ties, I'd rather have a guy that's performed well, versus a guy that's performed really poorly, right? So, up to you if you decide that it becomes a staple of your week. But I think it is something to look at here for sure. That definitely is a baseline defense of TPC San Antonio in terms of how this course can play and why we've seen some lower scores, or I guess higher scores, baseline scores. It's played over par over the last handful of years. So, all right, buddy. I'm going to remind people before we take off, take advantage of this drafters deal. Again, reach out if you have questions. $10 for 3 months of BetSports Golf. You're just not going to have a better deal at any point again for the rest of the season. It is you just go on the site and buy a quarterly. It's $80 subscription. You could do it with $10. Get a free $10 back from drafters as well to play. So like if you just do it the $10 way, you'll have $20 to spend on drafters, and then you'll have BetSports Golf through major season, right? So take advantage of it now. You get the Valero, obviously you get the Masters, and they'll take you through for 3 months. Fantastic deal. Again, promo code BSG when you download the app. And deposit and play $10. So if questions, reach out. Again, this is a article on the site for you to check out. Great way to get access to the rabbit hole, Ron's article, our Discord, all that stuff here for just $10. So doesn't get better than that. All right, head over to the site, check out Ron's preview. It's up on the site now. For subscribers, we'll probably have some bets coming in the Discord here in the next 24 to 48 hours as we kind of work our way through this board. Come back here to the BetSports Golf YouTube channel on Tuesday for the betting preview show. And again, if you want to pick Ron's brain, that's why you want to be in the Discord. All those questions on Wednesday night as you make those final DFS decisions, weather decisions, one and done, all that stuff. We're available in the Discord. So that is, again, much more valuable than $10 a week. You're going to be able to get that for just those 3 months. So take advantage of it. So appreciate it. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe before you take off and come back again on